Your phone buzzes. A message flashes. Canada officially waives visas for 10 Asian countries. You blink. Read it again. No interviews, no thick stacks of paperwork, just a passport and a plane ticket. But why now? And why those countries? This isn't just a travel story. This is a geopolitical move, a selective opening, and a quiet message from Canada to Asia. We're redrawing the map of global relations, and you've just been invited in. Canada opens its doors. When visas become diplomacy. For a long time, visas have been the key to global mobility, but also a symbol of power and selectivity. When a country suddenly says, "You don't need permission anymore, just come," it's not merely about easing procedures, it's a statement, a deliberate invitation. And when Canada unexpectedly removed visa requirements for 10 Asian countries, the world didn't just see a door to tourism open, it felt a political wind shifting direction. It's no coincidence that this decision was announced amid a time when global order is undergoing significant change. As the U.S. increasingly tightens its immigration procedures and China grows more cautious about the movement of people, Canada is going the opposite way. No fanfare, no loud bilateral agreements, no declarations in the name of humanitarian interests. Instead, they chose to act quietly, but sharply. Removing visas for 10 Asian countries is not merely a gesture of goodwill, it's a strategy. Because behind every visa stamp removed lies a relationship being reshaped between Canada and the rest of Asia, between a weakening West and a world searching for new partners to cling to in an era of prolonged uncertainty. Canada knows very well, if they don't proactively shape the future, they'll be swept along by the current of greater powers. And what they've chosen now is to use the visa, once considered a barrier, as a bridge. Look at the list of countries granted exemption, from wealthy but tiny Brunei to Thailand rising with an aspiring middle class, from Singapore, the leading tech and finance hub of Southeast Asia, to South Korea and Japan, two strategic allies of the West. Every name on that list is no random draw. They are links in a chain of partnerships that Canada is weaving. A new network of allies in the Asia-Pacific, a region seen as the pivot of the 21st century. And here's the interesting part. Canada didn't invite everyone. They were selective. They drew clear boundaries. This shows a deliberate strategy of shaping soft power, reaching out to nations with growing middle classes, with demand for education, investment, tourism, and with relatively stable politics. This is how Canada builds the image of being approachable, but not easily exploited. In a context where the U.S. faces waves of anti-immigration sentiment, the EU tightens its borders, and other nations hesitate amidst post-COVID mobility, Canada's move offers a contrasting image: confident, open, and strategic. It's a quiet message to the world that says, we choose cooperation over isolation. We choose to invest in people, instead of building fences. But more than that, this is also a reminder to Canada's longtime Western allies. While the U.S. is bogged down by internal division and has lost moral standing on the global stage, Canada seems to be testing the waters beyond the shadow of its big brother. And the way they're doing it, not through speeches, but through seemingly minor visa decisions, is creating a new map of influence. We often think that the world's great turning points are decided in summits, international treaties, or historic meetings between heads of state. But sometimes it begins with something far more ordinary. A country suddenly says, "You can come, and you're welcome." With Canada, that invitation isn't just for travelers. It's for an entire future looking for a new path, not by chance, when Canada chooses the right people at the right time. In today's political world, what matters is not just who gets invited, but who gets left behind. And that's precisely what makes the list of 10 Asian countries granted visa exemption by Canada so noteworthy. It's not simply a list of friendly nations, but a collection of names playing key roles on the regional chessboard, each with a strategic position, a distinct advantage, and a clear reason for being favored. There's no Philippines on the list, despite the fact that the Filipino community makes up a considerable portion of Canada's population. No Indonesia, the largest economy in Southeast Asia. No India, the world's most populous country and an increasingly sought-after partner by the West. But there is Brunei, a quiet microstate rarely mentioned. There is Taiwan, but only for ordinary passports with personal identification numbers. Not all. There is Israel, but only for citizens with official national passports, excluding Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. And it is exactly these choices, both subtle and limited, that make Canada's visa strategy as sharp as a scalpel in diplomatic surgery. Let's peel back the first layer. Selectivity. Canada isn't chasing numbers. It doesn't simply waive visas for the most populous nations or those with the largest diaspora communities. Instead, it looks at the quality of connection. Countries like Singapore, South Korea, Japan, though small in size, have stable middle classes, advanced education systems, and most importantly, their citizens tend to spend more, have strong immigration histories, and show a pattern of respecting international law. A Japanese tourist rarely breaks rules. A Singaporean entering Canada often has clear plans for study or investment. A Korean visitor to Vancouver brings more than a suitcase. They bring opportunities for tech partnerships, study abroad programs, or expansion of the booming K-beauty industry across the West. Second layer, political symbolism. Including Hong Kong, even as just a special administrative region, in the visa exemption list is a bold but calculated move. As China tightens its grip on freedoms in Hong Kong, Canada's removal of visa barriers for people there serves as a gesture of indirect support, without issuing any official statement. Similarly, granting visa waivers only to ordinary passports with personal identification numbers from Taiwan, not all travel documents, is a finely balanced diplomatic move, simultaneously avoiding provocation of Beijing while extending a warm hand to the Taiwanese public. Third layer, economics aligned with strategy. Israel, Singapore, Japan, these aren't just wealthy countries. They're global tech transit hubs. When Canada opens its doors to these nations, what it's really doing is inviting flows of brainpower, investment capital, and bilateral strategic ties. Israelis come to Canada not just to see maple leaves, they bring startups, cybersecurity solutions, and networks connected to Silicon Valley. Taiwanese bring semiconductors, Koreans bring AI innovations, and Malaysians or Thais, if they seize the moment, will bring a wave of students, engineers, and digital content creators. And finally, the deepest layer. A message to those not yet selected. Not being on the list doesn't mean permanent exclusion, but it is a quiet message. Improve your relationship. Prove you're trustworthy. It's an unspoken pressure, but a powerful one, that Canada, with its soft but steady diplomatic style, is placing on countries still sitting on the sidelines. In the end, a visa is not just an entry permit. It's a test of trust, a tool of diplomacy, and sometimes the most powerful declaration without saying a word. Canada has just chosen its first 10 names, and if the world is paying attention, it'll understand that this list is not closed. It has just opened a new chapter in how nations evaluate one another. Not with weapons, but with visas. An invitation or a message. When visas become the language of trust. On the surface, a visa exemption policy sounds like a polite invitation. Come visit, you're welcome here. But in a reality where every dot on the map carries strategic meaning, That invitation isn't just about openness. It's a message, a signal of relationship, of trust, and of the boundary between a companion and an observer. What makes Canada's 2025 visa exemption policy special isn't the number of countries included. It's how Canada says what it doesn't say, that it is ready to extend trust, but not to everyone, and that this trust is granted conditionally. The closer you read the list, the clearer it becomes. This isn't a tourism move, but a spiritual map of who is considered a strategic friend in a turbulent world. Let's put geopolitics aside for a moment and view this through a socio-psychological lens. In a world where borders are increasingly built out of fear, from terrorism, human trafficking, pandemics, to economic competition, the act of a country saying, "I won't scrutinize you thoroughly before letting you in," is a powerfully symbolic gesture. It's not just leniency, it's trust. Trust is a delicate concept. It doesn't arise from handshakes at international summits, nor can it be measured by GDP or the number of trade agreements signed. It stems from a history of conduct, from a sense of safety when looking at you, and from the expectation that you won't cause harm. And that's precisely the spirit of this wave of visa exemptions. Canada is choosing friends not based on closeness, but based on reliability. The Japanese, Koreans, and Singaporeans, they're not just granted visa exemptions because of strong economies or long-standing trade relations. They were chosen because they've tested trust for many years and haven't disappointed Canada. Meanwhile, there are nations with large populations and deep trade ties, yet they remain outside the visa door. Simply put, trust isn't handed out by volume. It's built over time and protected through repeated behaviors. And this applies not only to nations, it applies to individuals. A citizen holding a visa-exempt passport enters a new country with a very different feeling, not as someone asking for permission, but as someone who's been invited. That feeling changes how they view Canada and how they behave when they arrive. A person who feels trusted will act differently than someone who feels controlled. And that is why visa exemption is not just a policy, but a mechanism for spreading influence. When you're granted visa-free access, you return to your country with a positive story, that your country is respected, that you are welcomed without suspicion. And from there, the bilateral relationship expands beyond trade agreements or joint seminars. It spreads into social life, media, education, investment, and even collective consciousness. On the flip side, countries not granted visa exemption will realize one thing: they're being watched. And if they want to get closer to that circle of trust, they need to change, not only in terms of state policy, but also in how their citizens appear on the global stage. This is when visa policy becomes a tool for indirect influence, subtle yet more effective than any treaty. Canada understands this well. And in a world divided by populism, discrimination, and invisible walls, visa policy, a seemingly small detail, is becoming the language of 21st century international relations. A visa, when granted to the right person at the right time, not only opens a border, it opens the door to trust. And Canada, by choosing who gets to walk through without knocking, is writing a new chapter in the challenging book titled "Who Do You Trust and Who Truly Trusts You?" A new tourism standard, when every visitor is an investment. If you think Canada is waiving visas just to attract more tourists, then perhaps you're looking at the situation through an outdated lens. The era of quick trips, snap a few photos, buy some souvenirs, then leave, is fading. What Canada is aiming for is no longer the number of visitors, but the quality of them. People who don't just spend money, but also connect, learn, invest, and sometimes stay. Take a closer look at the list of countries granted visa exemptions. Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Israel, Taiwan, UAE, Malaysia, Thailand, Hong Kong, Brunei? Is there a common thread? Yes, and it's not geography or religion. It's in consumer behavior and ripple effect value. Visitors from these countries are among the highest spenders. They stay longer, and most importantly, they return. They don't just come once to check in, but come back to study at university, invest in technology, buy homes, explore remote areas, or host startup conferences with local partners. They are not just tourists. They are channels of opportunity. To policymakers in Ottawa, tourism is no longer a standalone industry. It's the entry point to every other flow: education, technology, real estate, commerce, even people-to-people diplomacy. And when that gate is opened through visa policy, Canada is subtly saying, "We don't just want you to come, we want you to become a part of us." This becomes even clearer when you look at how Canada is reshaping its tourism market. They're not targeting the bucket list crowd or low-cost mass tours. Instead, they welcome multi-generational families vacationing long-term in British Columbia, young couples exploring agri-tech investment opportunities in Alberta, or Singaporean students heading to Toronto to seek AI scholarships. And here's the thing: high-quality travelers rarely come alone. They bring with them family, relationships, knowledge, and sometimes even a company. A Korean engineer might attend a conference in Canada, then return with a startup project. An investor from the UAE may go skiing in Quebec and discover the potential to acquire a local hotel chain. A student from Taiwan might study in Montreal and later recommend their entire high school class to follow. In other words, each tourist is a seed, and Canada is choosing what kind of seeds will be planted on its soil, not because they're strict, but because they think long-term. Visa policy today is no longer just about border control. It's a strategic filter. And when Canada filters the right audience, those with long-term connection potential, the impact doesn't stop at increasing tourism GDP. It spills over into education, financial services, real estate, artificial intelligence, and even soft diplomacy through social media. Here's another interesting detail. Visa-exempt travelers also tend to become natural cultural ambassadors. They'll share their good experiences in Canada with friends, post videos on YouTube, write reviews, vlog. Every compliment, every TikTok clip with snow in Banff or an Indigenous cultural festival in Manitoba is a free marketing campaign, often more effective than a multi-million-dollar government ad budget. And if you're wondering why Canada extended this privilege to Brunei, a small country, the answer is here. Bruneian citizens are among the highest-spending travelers per trip in Southeast Asia. Few in number, but wealthy. Quiet, but valuable. And they travel not to flaunt luxury brands, but to deeply appreciate meaningful experiences. That's exactly the kind of traveler Canada wants to see walk through the gates at Pearson Airport. Canada isn't looking for tourists, it's seeking potential companions. And when you look at the list of 10 visa-exempt countries, you don't see a random selection. You see a carefully designed strategy to invite those who don't just come, but stay, contribute, and leave a mark. This isn't just opening the door for fun. It's how a nation invests in its own future, one guest at a time. Soft diplomacy in a hot zone. When a visa becomes a statement. Modern international politics no longer operates through blatant shows of power. Grand treaties, military alliances, and trade wars still exist, but what shapes the undercurrent beneath it all is soft diplomacy. And one of the most subtle tools of soft diplomacy is the visa. Canada understands this well. In a world gradually sliding into polarization, where East and West no longer speak the same strategic language, and where middle powers are quietly competing for influence, each visa waiver decision is not merely an act of openness. It is a gentle yet clear statement. We are choosing sides, but we don't need to shout it. Look at Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Israel. Three cases that are not simply about attracting tourists. These are sensitive points on the geopolitical map, and their presence on the visa exemption list, even with specific conditions, reveals how Canada is executing a silent strategic arrangement. With Hong Kong, the timing of the visa removal could not be more coincidental. After years of upheaval due to China's new security law, thousands of Hong Kongers have sought settlement in the UK, Australia, and Canada. But with the visa waiver decision, Canada is not just welcoming tourists. It is sending a message to young Hong Kongers seeking spiritual mobility, that here you are still considered part of the free world. With Taiwan, the policy does not target all passports, but only accepts ordinary passports with personal identification numbers. This is not a technical detail, but a political boundary. It shows that Canada is walking a fine line between recognizing the value of the Taiwanese people without directly provoking Beijing. This is the art of balance, expressing goodwill to a valuable partner in technology, education, and democracy, while avoiding unnecessary conflict with a superpower watching every diplomatic move. As for Israel, the visa exemption is a way to reaffirm a traditional relationship at just the right time. While the Middle East descends into renewed chaos, and the U.S. becomes increasingly divided over policy toward Tel Aviv, Canada makes a tidy decision: visa-free entry for Israeli citizens with national passports. No noise, no alliance declarations, but everyone understands. This is a handshake of serious weight, especially since just months earlier, the U.S. had added Israel to its ESTA visa waiver list. What's notable is that in all three cases, Canada did not choose the easy path. They didn't declare support for independence, didn't engage in rhetorical battles with China, nor did they align with Washington's pressure blocks. Instead, they carefully laid each brick in a trust-building strategy with populations, communities, seeking places of stability, fairness, and freedom. And that gives Canada a soft advantage not every nation enjoys: trust in silence. No one fears Canada, but many trust Canada. And in an era where soft power can determine investment flows, study abroad trends, and immigration choices, being trusted can be more valuable than being respected. Visa exemption is not a PR stunt. It is political action in polite language. It is how a country sends a message to the world: we are still watching, selecting, and ready to engage, but on our terms, not through blatant factionalism. When the visa becomes a tool of soft diplomacy, each of Canada's decisions doesn't just open a border. It opens new spheres of influence without firing a bullet, without overnight negotiations. Just one sentence: "You're visa exempt," and the whole world will understand on its own who's at the center and who's still on the margins. From visa to talent corridor. When Canada welcomes the future home. When Canada waives visa requirements for a country, what it receives isn't just a wave of tourists or a few extra flights. What it truly opens is a talent corridor, a steady and silent flow of young people, tech minds, healthcare, education, and startup professionals. People who don't just want to visit, but want to stay, learn, contribute, and become a part of Canada. This is something few notice if they only read the list of visa-exempt countries in the news. But if you're a university president in Ontario, an AI research center director in Vancouver, or a hospital executive in Toronto struggling with a shortage of nurses, you'll understand. The Canadians truly waiting at the border gates aren't just tourists. For thousands of students from South Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, or Thailand studying at Canadian universities, the visa waiver isn't just about travel convenience. It's a statement that they are welcome long-term. They're not merely temporary residents, but are seen as potential contributors, living links in the nation's human development strategy. Let's look at the facts. Canada is a vast, resource-rich, politically stable country, but it also faces challenges from an aging population, a shortage of high-quality labor, and fierce competition from the US, Australia, and the UK in attracting global talent. In that context, a smart visa policy is the key to unlocking the successor workforce the economy needs. Don't forget, today's visa-exempt students could become tomorrow's permanent residents. And they don't arrive empty-handed. They bring a second language, technological knowledge, diverse cultural backgrounds, and most importantly, a desire to live in a fair, stable society with opportunities for personal growth. They are exactly the kind of people every civilized nation desires. And here, Canada takes a step ahead. Not just waiting for talent to apply for immigration, but proactively inviting them through visa policy, transforming travel into a pathway for legal, subtle, but effective settlement. Especially with countries like South Korea, Singapore, or Israel, where education systems produce large numbers of engineers, doctors, and programmers. Canada's visa waiver is an official invitation. Come, explore, and if you're a good fit, stay. No loud PR campaigns needed. A single ETA click has opened the door to an entire future. And we must mention the connection between visas and the tech ecosystem. Many of the visa-exempt countries are regional tech hubs. Taiwan with semiconductors, South Korea with AI and robotics, Singapore with fintech, Israel with cybersecurity. Their easy access to Canada means easier connections between labs, R&D centers, startups, and innovation incubators. Initial visits can lead to academic collaboration, joint research, and even launching branches in Canada. One often overlooked detail: workers in tech, education, and healthcare from Asian countries tend to stay long-term if welcomed properly. Unlike seasonal migration or students who leave after graduation, those welcomed with trusted visa access come with a spirit of contribution and commitment. They send their children to Canadian schools, they learn French, they work in local companies, and contribute for decades, like true native citizens. So when you see a young Thai person step off a plane in Vancouver, a Singaporean engineer visiting the AI fair in Toronto, or an Israeli student touring a university in Montreal, don't just think they're here to travel. Understand that Canada is recognizing individuals who could become part of its high-quality future population. A smart visa policy doesn't just make a country more populous. It makes it better, more diverse, and more sustainable. And in the 21st century, when battles are no longer just about weapons or resources, but about human intellect, each passport entering Canada today could very well belong to the one creating tomorrow's solutions. And the strange thing is, it all begins with a brief announcement: "You're visa exempt." But to Canada, that phrase has never been small. It's the beginning of a more vibrant, intelligent, and humane future, one person at a time, redrawing the global map, when Canada is no longer just the nice one. For decades, Canada has often been seen as a pleasant neighbor, a nice guy of the world, non-aggressive, non-imposing, non-confrontational. But the world of 2025 is no longer the world of the 2000s. And Canada, with its recent series of sophisticated visa policies, is quietly transforming from a nice country into a strategic player, one that knows how to pick the right moment, the right partners, and most importantly, knows where it wants to stand on the global chessboard. What we are witnessing is not just a change in entry procedures, it's a redefinition of Canada's geopolitical role, through something seemingly small: the visa. Each country granted visa exemption represents a new direction in how Canada views the world, toward the Asia-Pacific, toward rising economies, toward technology, youthful populations, and long-term stability. Let's look back at recent history. While the United States has been caught up in internal divisions and is gradually narrowing its doors to global engagement, Canada is opening new ones, but selectively. It's not inviting everyone. It's not making loud proclamations. It doesn't need allies in the traditional sense. It needs partners with a future. This carries enormous significance for Canada's role in the changing world order. No longer a follower of the major powers, Ottawa is beginning to proactively shape its image as a replacement center, a trustworthy choice in an unstable world. And the visa, something that seems purely technical, is the very language of that shift. The world is entering an era of uncertainty. The European Union is struggling with migration and security crises. The U.S. is retreating into protectionist policies. China is tightening control and becoming less flexible in regional relations. Meanwhile, Canada is emerging as a country strong enough, soft enough, to become a transit point for trust. A nation doesn't need to be a superpower to shape the world. Sometimes, just by holding on to principles, staying calm in storms, and being flexible at the right moments is enough to make others begin to see it differently. And Canada is doing exactly that, quietly. The visa exemption for 10 Asian countries is not a spontaneous gesture. It's the opening move in a long-term game where Canada is placing soft, but weighty, pieces into strategic positions. Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, places that converge with technology, young populations, investment, and latent instability. Placing a visa there isn't about buying tourists, but about planting small but deep links, gradually reshaping a new global influence network. Not one of hegemony, but of trust. And the world is paying attention. What Canada is doing might not make flashy headlines, but it shifts the rhythm. It makes other countries ask, why aren't we on the list? Or, are we missing a new opportunity for cooperation? It triggers a quiet competition, where a visa is no longer just a travel permit, but a measure of relationship. And in the world of soft power, nothing is stronger than an invitation that doesn't need permission. From now on, Canada isn't just a livable, beautiful, peaceful country. Canada is becoming a new designer of global connection, a country that knows how to choose the right people, open the right doors, and speak at the right time, without needing to speak loudly. And that, in a world increasingly chaotic, is what makes Canada so special. Not because it dominates, but because it creates the space for others to want to come closer. Not out of pressure, but from the desire to be part of something more stable, more human, and smarter. A country doesn't need to dominate to be influential. Sometimes, it just needs to know how to open the door, at the right time.